combined November, December Transportation Commission meeting. In honor of the season, you can see our solstice bush behind me. Might serve other purposes later. And my hope for snow in the Sierra is represented by this token snowman. No pressure, but if you choose to show holiday bling, feel free. It's up to you. I miss our, this is the second year we've missed our holiday dessert potluck, and hopefully we can return to that next year, or maybe we'll break out and do it a little early in the summer or something. Moving right along, I would like to first read the land acknowledgement statement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lejeune. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and to together build a better future for all that now make this their home here in Albany. Thank you. Mr. Freed, would you take roll, please?
Certainly. Commissioner Del Rosario.
Present.
Commissioner Graham.
Here.
Commissioner Javindel.
Present.
Vice Chair Fong.
Present.
Chair McCroskey.
Present. Brief congratulations to Commissioner Fong on his recent nuptials, and welcome back this month. Good to see you.
Thanks.
And with that, let's move along to general public comment. This is the time for individuals wishing to address the commission on items that are not otherwise on our agenda. And to do that, you would use the raise hand feature on your Zoom window. And I'm not seeing anybody with their hand raised, but let's give it a moment. Okay, not seeing any hands raised. Let's move on to item number 3, the presentations. Mr. Freed.
Thank you, Chair McCroskey. Item 3-1 is the police data on collisions and citations. This is reporting for the month of October. There were 2 auto pedestrian collisions reported, 3 bicycle collisions, 17 vehicle collisions, 6 of which were injury collisions. 44 moving citations were issued, and 5 DUI arrests were made. That concludes my report.
All right. Any commission questions about the data? Commissioner Del Rosario.
Thanks. It seems like the citations and DUIs are increasing in recent months, and I assume that's just due to higher volume of vehicular activity out there as things reopen.
I can ask police department for additional information. I know that they are staffing up. They've had some additional hires in the not too recent past, so that may also be more patrol hours at this point.
Thanks.
Any other commissioner questions? Seeing none, we'll open it up to public comment and questions. Again, you would use the raise your hand feature if you're interested in commenting or asking a question. And I'm not seeing any. So I'm going to bring it back to the commission. And do any commissioners have any comments? Commissioner Javindel.
Yeah, so I managed to feature myself in the data we just looked at.
by getting hit by a car while I was on my bike. And just reminds me why we pay attention to this stuff. We try to make safe facilities and make good decisions for public safety out there. And even, at an always stop. I always tell people stop signs aren't proof against collisions. Stopped at a stop sign, signaled a left turn, saw a car on my right, figured they arrived first, so I'd wait for them. They turned onto the wrong side of the road and hit me head on. So kind of one of those quirky, weird things. I'm glad I had just enough time to start throwing my weight to the side so that even though my bike went under the car, I went off to the side and didn't get flattened. But again, this is why, it's not just the bike paths we build, but we have to get from our house to the closest bike path, which is pretty much exactly where I was headed, down to the Buchanan bike path. So not to make a big fuss over it, but to thank all of you, staff and fellow commissioners, for all of the efforts that you put into improving our transportation facilities in Albany and throughout the area, frankly. It makes a difference. It's not proof against people not looking where they're going or being distracted or whatever. I'm not trying to pick on anyone, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And the more we minimize that, the more we can reduce the likelihood of people getting hit and injured. And frankly, I'm very lucky. Beyond a sprained wrist and a couple bumps and bruises, I'm fine. My bike's toast, but that's okay. Those are replaceable. So just thank you all.
Well, and thank you, for your efforts here and in your daily job. I think karmically, this was a really unfair incident. And I know you didn't choose to put yourself in those statistics, despite the way you worded your statement. May we all stay out of the statistics. Any other commissioner comments? Seeing none, let's keep moving on. I believe we have shared mobility data this month.
Yes, we do. We have data from September and October from Gig Car Share. They saw increases in active members up to 222 in September and 281 in October, as well as significant increases in trips, with trips starts of 447 in September and 592 in October. That's my shared mobility report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from commissioners? Make sure I look at everyone. Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions from commissioners. Do we have any public comment on the shared mobility data? You'd use the raise your hand feature, the button down at the bottom of your screen. Seeing none, I will bring it back to the commission for any comments. Commissioner Javadel.
Just a quick note that the Berkeley City Council recently approved a shared micromobility or electric micromobility permit program. Implementation of that is underway, and I would expect within a couple months we'll start to see electric scooters and similar devices deployed in Berkeley, which just brings them closer to Albany and the likelihood that some of those will be deployed here as well.
Was that just one vendor?
No, it's at least in theory is 3 to start with, and expandable if demand is there.
Great. Thanks for that news. Any other commissioner comments? Great. Let's move on to our consent calendar. We have one. I'm sorry.
We
Please.
do have a hand raised now.
Oh, thank you. Let's take that public comment.
Let's see, Justin, I think you're going to have to unmute the attendees for the moment.
Hi, it's Amy Smallins. You hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So I just want to, glad you're okay, Commissioner Javendel. I would just want to know some details on this, on the Berkeley micromobility that you mentioned. Are those micro scooters going to be allowed in Albany, or is there going to be a geofence type situation? Just what do you know about that as far as if they can go down Solano and if they can be shared from your city to our city? That's my only question. Thank you.
Good question. And the permit program really doesn't address what happens in cities outside of Berkeley. So unless Albany takes action to say otherwise, I would expect people would riding down Solano and Berkeley would continue into Albany. But the Berkeley permit program is silent on that. So it neither encourages nor prohibits spillover into adjacent cities. But I do expect that for the other cities that have similar permit programs, Oakland and Emeryville, that we will likely see some of the same players.
Great. So I think we had no other comments from commissioners. We've got our public comment, and we're going to move on to the consent calendar. The sole item are the meeting minutes of the October 28th meeting. Does any commissioner want to poll the meeting minutes, or any member of the public for discussion? I'm not seeing any hands raised from the public. I'm not seeing any commissioners raising their hands. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Can I get a second?
Second.
I saw Javendel first. Any further discussion? Mr. Freed, would you take a roll vote?
Commissioner Del Rosario,
Yes.
Commissioner Graham,
Yes.
Commissioner Javendel,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fong,
Abstain.
Chair McCoskey.
Great. With that, we'll move on to our discussion and possible action item 5.1, the Pavement Management Program conceptual plans for Key Route Boulevard.
A moment here. All right. Thank you, Chair McCroskey. Tonight's discussion is on the pavement program and in particular Key Route Boulevard. For this presentation, I'll briefly run through background information on both the pavement program and the policy context for the concepts under consideration tonight. I'll then hand it over to Andrew Lee from Parisi Transportation Consulting to discuss the new project concept. When he's done, I'll then talk through the project impacts. Commissioners should feel free to ask questions during the presentation, but we'll follow the presentation with time for commission questions, public comment, and commission discussion and potential action. Project being discussed tonight is part of Albany's street rehabilitation program. The primary objective for the project is to improve and maintain pavement conditions in the city. The project also includes necessary improvements to roadways to achieve compliance with Americans with Disabilities Act requirements, which generally entails upgrades to non-compliant curb ramps. The current pavement project roadways were identified in the pavement management plan developed in 2019 and are the result of an analysis of current conditions and roadway treatment options and planned utility work by the city and other agencies. The current set of projects have been separated into 3 phases. The first 2 phases are currently in design, and at the June Commission meeting, staff identified several street segments for planning work to be presented to the Commission in advance of proceeding into design. These street segments were identified for evaluation of potential active transportation and safety improvements to be considered for inclusion in the pavement project. So for Key Route Boulevard, the Albany Active Transportation Plan includes a Class 3 bike route on Key Route as part of the proposed Fast Bikeways network. The ATP also includes a boulevard median walking path concept. There's also been previous design work the Commission has considered. At the December 2020 meeting, the Commission discussed and recommended median stops be installed along Key Route Boulevard, similar to what is now in place at the intersection with Brighton. This is intended to improve visibility and reduce the number of conflict points between movements through the intersection. Additional signage and striping improvements at the Key Route intersections were also recommended at that meeting and will be incorporated into the project design. Signage and striping plans were prepared for much of the on-street bicycle network in the active transportation plan. For Key Route Boulevard, these plans include a bicycle lane in the southbound direction and a shared vehicle and bicycle lane in the northbound direction. This design difference is due to differences in the roadway width in the northbound and southbound directions. This layout retains existing parking adjacent to the median in both directions. This configuration has not yet been installed and is one option for the street configuration for the upcoming pavement project. And with that, I will hand it over to Andrew to talk about the other concept we're presenting tonight.
Okay, super. Good evening, commissioners. I'm going to share, we'll wait for Justin to stop sharing, and then I will share my screen.
Welcome back.
Thank you. So for Key Route, this item was presented last month, and this is a follow-up based on direction received from the Commission on other opportunities for bicycle lanes and bicycle separated bikeways on Key Route. As a refresher, this is the existing cross-section that exists from the north city limit to Solano Avenue, which is the south terminal for Key Route Boulevard. This cross-section is looking south. And so on your left here are the northbound lanes. There is approximately 29.5 feet curb to curb width with parking on both sides and a 14.5 foot vehicle lane. In the southbound direction, it is wider by approximately 3 feet. So there's a curb to curb width of 32.5 feet there. Based on Commission direction from last month's meeting, I'll start with the southbound direction as that concept has remained constant to what you reviewed prior, which is that parking can be retained on both sides and a on-street bike lane between the parking lane on the right and the moving vehicle lane on the left can be installed. We're also showing a 2-foot buffer adjacent to this 5-foot bike lane. The buffer, depending on the situation, can be moved to the right or the left. We are showing it on the left as a concept. In the northbound direction, we're modifying the proposal to remove parking on the median side. And this is particular to the portion south of Portland Avenue and north of Thousand Oaks Boulevard. So these are the blocks not bounding Albany High School. They are the residential blocks to the north and to the south. And so with this proposal, it maintains on-street parking next to the residences. The parking that would be removed, and this would be half of the parking along the block, in fact, more than half of the parking, due to the presence of driveways on the residential side of the street, that median adjacent parking would be removed. And in its place, a approximate 6-foot bikeway with a 2.5-foot buffer can be installed. And so this would move the moving vehicle lane running median side. We're also showing a 2-foot buffer, which could be installed as a yellow stripe, so that the vehicle lane does not exceed 11 feet. However, the effective width would be wider due to the presence of the buffers. In the section that is adjacent to Albany High School, this concept changes in the northbound direction. The southbound direction remains the same. And the difference in the concept here is that the bikeway would be running curbside next to Albany High in the northbound direction. There would be a 3 to 5 foot buffer depending on the type of parking that would be installed, which would be located between the bikeway buffer and the moving vehicle lane. So as before with the prior concept cross-section, the on-street parking adjacent to the median would be removed, and instead the moving vehicle lane would be placed alongside the median. Again, the parking along the north side of Key Route Boulevard would be removed in order to provide this bikeway, and I will let Justin talk about those potential parking impacts. This is the cross section, so I also want to show what these concepts look like in a plan view. And so I'm going to start in the section south of Thousand Oaks Boulevard. Actually, let me start north of Thousand Oaks Boulevard, excuse me. This is the first cross section, and so this is where the on-street parking running median side would be removed. And in its place, the moving vehicle lane would take its place. There would be a on-street buffered bike lane that would be placed between the moving vehicle lane and on-street parking next to the residences on the east side of Key Route Boulevard. And I'll just jump over. This is the way it would look south of Portland Avenue. Again, the buffered bike lane between the on-street parking and the moving vehicle lane in the northbound direction. Now I'll just talk briefly about what the intersections would look like. So there is a transition that happens between a buffered bike lane, which is between moving traffic and parked vehicles, and how it transitions laterally into a bikeway where the bikeway would be running curbside. This is adjacent to Albany High. And there would then be a lateral buffer, which could be paint or posts or other features. And then on-street parking would be in this zone, which would then be adjacent to the vehicle lane. So this concept affords a fair amount of protection for people on bike if there are people in cars wanting to make drop-off or pickup operations in northbound Key Route. And this concept is more protective of people on bikes compared to an on-street buffered bike lane where without the separation afforded by parked cars, there could be a fair number of people using the bike lane to make drop-off and pickup operations. And so this is unique to the block adjacent to Albany High. Within the intersection here at Portland, and as I'll show you at Thousand Oaks, we are using a protected intersection style treatment, which has been developed over the past decade or so, which encourages a large lateral separation between turning vehicles so that somebody in northbound Key Route wanting to turn right has a large degree of separation from somebody on a bike such that they can make a partial turn without encroaching fully into the bikeway, and being closer to the 90-degree approach at Portland Avenue can see out of the passenger side window and determine whether or not it's safe before proceeding through the intersection.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Is that all implemented or projected to be implemented with paint, or are there any other features?
Paint is one component, but it is more common to also have raised features. And I have not shown them here, but they range from things as simple as plastic posts that are affixed to the ground and can be escalated up to concrete islands with concrete curbs, other more temporary features that are bolted in curb stop like features. But I certainly expect a raised feature component to be integrated in zones that I've marked with cross-hatching here in order to encourage people in cars to not encroach into these striped zones and to be more aware and make their turning operations at a lower speed.
Thank you.
This is at the north end of Albany High, and so we are then proceeding from a separated bikeway design and transitioning through the intersection into the buffered bike lane design. And the principles mentioned before still apply, which are that with a greater lateral separation, it affords more safety for people on bike and in cars to stage their movements, have a clearer line of sight before making the turn. And it also affords a greater amount of separation for people walking as well, as a person in the crosswalk can make a multi-stage turn, making sure that there's nobody on bike, and then having a place of refuge before ultimately crossing through the vehicle lane as well. And so there are multiple benefits with this type of design and having a more protected intersection style treatment. I'm going to pause and turn it back over to Justin at this point.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So with that, I'll briefly talk through anticipated project impacts. The city's general plan includes a number of policy goals to consider in making design decisions for city streets. Streets do serve several functions, and their design is a balance among these different uses. Policy goals include complete streets and providing safe, comfortable, and convenient travel for all users, providing context-sensitive design that respects the local physical context, improves the safety of travel, and contributes to the city's identity, and designing streets and other transportation features that help to connect the city, enhance neighborhood livability, and facilitate safer and more convenient travel. This segment of Key Route is identified as a north-south minor arterial in the Albany General Plan roadway classification, and therefore it does serve a large segment of the city. It also serves to access Albany High School, as well as many adjacent homes and nearby Solano Avenue businesses. Adjacent bicycle facilities, both existing and those proposed in the active transportation plan, include facilities adjacent in El Cerrito on Ashbury to the north, and east-west connections on Brighton, Portland, and Washington. Concept 1, the current striping plan, would provide a bicycle lane connection in the southbound direction and rely on shared vehicle lane in the northbound direction, and would only be a partial connection on the bicycle network. Concept 2 would provide comparable cycling facilities in both directions. An additional feature of the network is that the Alona Greenway does provide an off-street facility near to Key Route and is mostly parallel, although skewed and at an increasing distance as it goes further to the north. It also does not directly connect to the high school. Given the relatively short travel distances of the high school student community, there is significant demand for walking and cycling routes to campus. And staff counted 50 bicycles at racks off of Key Route and the interior of campus, and an additional 22 bicycles and 2 scooters off of Portland. In a recent survey, a key benefit of the parking protected bicycle lane, as Andrew mentioned, would be providing bicycle facilities to the school and reducing potential conflicts between cyclists and motor vehicles, particularly during the congested pickup and drop-off times. Key Route Boulevard is relatively unique in the city of Albany, with a wide median providing curbside parking that's not adjacent to residences or businesses. As a result, it currently provides a significant amount of parking capacity. Staff estimates approximately 364 total spaces along this segment of Key Route between the city limits and Solano Avenue. Aside from serving the residential homes, parking along Key Route generally does serve the high school community and Solano Avenue businesses. In a 3-day parking survey, higher occupancy was observed, particularly between Portland and Brighton, and on the southern half of the block between Solano and Washington. And comments received, written and addressed to the commission, reinforce this with residents highlighting the use of Key Route for parking, both by teachers at the high school and employees at nearby businesses. The current parking occupancy counted by staff overall was observed at approximately 60% for the whole corridor. In terms of thinking about the trade-offs and the costs and benefits of the concept two, as was outlined by Andrew, staff is really thinking about this in 3 different segments. One between Portland and the city limits, and bridging the connections to the high school with the east-west connections along Portland and Brighton and into El Cerrito and the area furthest away from Masonic and the Ohlone Greenway, the middle section between Portland and Washington, and then the further south segment between Washington and Solano. And given the increasing cumulative impacts of parking, the further extent you go along providing this facility with the diminishing additional connections as you get closer to the Greenway and towards Solano Avenue, staff's recommendation is to install the design concept 2 as presented by Andrew between Portland and the northern city limits, and to proceed with the concept 1, the shared bicycle and travel lane between Solano and Washington. And staff didn't have a recommendation between the 2 for that middle zone where it's additional east-west links to the Washington Avenue Bicycle Boulevard, but a significant increase in the amount of parking impact on that. So staff is interested in commissioner recommendation on that, or additional feedback or information you would be looking to help inform that decision. And we're now ready to proceed to commission questions, followed by public comment and then commission discussion. And with that, I'll hand it over to Chair McCroskey.
Thank you. So let's start with commissioner questions. Commissioner Del Rosario?
Yeah, thanks. And I have a few, so you can excuse my lengthiness. I'll get started. I saw in one of the public comments about concerns over street cleaning. Can staff explain how street cleaning works and how often along Key Route?
Sure. Street cleaning is signed for the block between Solano and Washington. It's 1 day a month, and it's one side or the other, both. So northbound Key Route or southbound, I believe it covers both sides of this northbound or southbound. So the median adjacent parking as well as the resident or high school adjacent. I believe it's only signed for that first block. So I believe street sweeping goes through the full stretch, but it's only signed and enforced on that southernmost block currently.
Okay. Next question is, how would potential conflicts be managed between the northbound bike lane in front of the high school and drop off? And is there an ADA requirement there for passenger drop off?
Andrew can chime in as well. He included a scenario for a wider zone between the vehicle parking lane and the bike lane for a potential ADA, continuing the existing ADA spots. The bike lane would narrow, the buffer would increase to accommodate an accessible space that way. In terms of the conflicts between passengers getting dropped off and crossing, that is a potential conflict. It is a fair bit of unloading space in the zone adjacent to the parking lane for people to get out of the car and then be able to see if a cyclist is coming. The other component of this, we haven't asked Andrew to look at this level of detail, but if we proceeded into design, we would be able to look at the placement of the loading zone. I think there are relatively few loading, sort of the white zone spaces, and we can make sure to potentially adjust where they're located to make sure that those are north of where the bikes would be exiting the bike lane, at least for the morning drop off. That could accommodate some of that. I don't know that you could do that both for morning and afternoon, but I would assume that that would probably be the most acute, would be the morning approach, and cyclists wouldn't be exiting with the same level of conflict because you would be exiting from the street side to get to the car as a passenger loading in the afternoon. But we can look sort of at the spatial layout in terms of where those loading zones are to try to minimize some of that conflict.
And this is just striping, correct, at the loading zone? So there's no curb or anything like that that the cars park up against?
It's striping. I mean, as Andrew discussed, there are a range of vertical elements you could put in. I think they're a little more constrained as it being a loading zone, but it is wide enough. You probably could still think of delineators or other elements in there.
Okay. The notifications for the project in this meeting, can you tell me who received the notification?
We did our regular 150-foot buffer notification for the entire length of Key Route from Solano to the city limits. And we reached out directly to the high school principal and provided the information. So that was our notification for the meeting.
Okay. So essentially every property along Key Route and then 150 feet in on the cross streets.
That's correct.
Okay. And then can you say more about the school feedback? I know there was a sentence in there about the schools having concerns about this. And then in addition to that question, is there any parking restrictions on other streets around the school or the park or anywhere in that vicinity? where other opportunities to park are possible.
What was the last part of that?
Just can private autos park pretty much unrestricted, or during school hours on other streets other than Key Route, or is there restrictions on those other streets?
Got it. There are several other loading zones adjacent to the high school, but most of them are on Key Route. There's, I think,
I was thinking more about all day parking. So teachers, faculty, staff, students, whoever drive, can they park anywhere else other than Key Route?
Yeah, so there are not parking restrictions for teachers or other visitors on other residential streets. We don't have permit parking. The area that has restrictions is the business district, and so Solano Avenue, and then any commercial property as it wraps around off of Solano Avenue has 90-minute zones generally signed. Masonic is the closest that doesn't have adjacent residences, that also has a decent amount of parking inventory and availability. You had an earlier question though too as part of that. Right?
Maybe I can just add a little bit to that. I studied this area when I was making a map, and specifically the only other loading zones near the high school that are signed and limited during the day are between Key Route and Pomona on Thousand Oaks and on Portland. There are a couple of other handicap spots on Portland, but other than that, there are no non-street sweeping restrictions.
So that's like for the side entrance to the high school on Thousand Oaks?
It's actually traditionally more about the pool, and more recently about the rehoused elementary students.
Yeah, okay. My other piece of that question, Justin, was just additional feedback from the school. And I think there was like a sentence mentioned about it in the staff report.
Yeah, the principal indicated that there may be an assistant principal attending, so we may hear more in public comments. I haven't received anything additional in writing, but it was a relatively quick turnaround for providing these designs to them.
And then my last question is bicyclists, I think traveling from Key Route northbound to Brighton to get to the middle school seems to be a popular movement. How would that technically work in this configuration? It seems like it'd be the same, that you shift over into the general purpose lane and then signal to turn left. Is that correct? Or you can get off your bike, I guess, and cross on the right side.
Yes, you could. When you approach Brighton, it would be the cross section A, which would be buffered bike lane, and so person on bike could move over into the vehicle lane and turn left with the flow of traffic. Or another movement would be a two-stage crossing where somebody stays in the bike lane, goes to the far side of the intersection, and then makes a left turn with westbound traffic.
Great. Thanks for the information. That was really helpful.
Great. Thanks for those questions. Commissioner Graham had a hand raised.
Well, my question is more about process, in that this is a pavement management program. So in terms of the budget, some of the things that we're talking about, such as raised curbs or other amenities that would help with the buffered bike lanes, are there funds to cover those types of improvements outside of sort of the pavement reconstruction that we're talking about, which is what the funds are for, correct?
That's correct. So we are looking what we could do with primarily striping, and I think flexible bollards could be considered, or some other relatively considered more temporary treatments as part of this would not be a huge amount of cost when you start talking about curb islands and that kind of thing. That's when I think we get into the zone of it being a standalone bicycle improvement project. So we've been evaluating the pavement program with what we could do within taking advantage of, we are resurfacing the street, that if it gets to the stage where it is a significant cost over that, we would be looking to identify bicycle improvement or funding, active transportation funding.
Okay, so basically we need to be thinking about sort of paint and plastic bollards or other sort of less permanent, probably less expensive types of investments to deliver some of these proposed changes. Okay, that was my only question. Well, other than Commissioner Del Rosario asked them all.
Thank you. Other commissioner questions? I'm seeing a shake of the head from Javandal Fong as well. All right. I had a question. One of the letters from the community made a mention of the plan in front of the high school restricting bus loading, specifically teams arriving to play sports or departing to other schools. I didn't see anything that I thought would block buses, but I thought I'd throw that out there to staff.
No, the existing parking adjacent to the school essentially shifts in, so the loading and parking area, the school side remains with the proposal. The overall capacity does reduce for that block with removing parking on the median side, but the intent with the design is to continue to provide loading and access, could be for buses as much as for other vehicles.
Great.
Can I follow up to that,
please?
What is the width again from median to curb? Just trying to think of a shuttle vehicle or a shuttle bus there that's whatever 8 or 9 feet across, and then maybe it has a foot away from the buffer. So I just want to see what the remaining roadway would be if there is a bus parked there. If that's fine. Oh, there you go. Okay. So maybe the lane would go down to 10.5 or something like that. Okay, thanks.
Great. So if there are no other commissioner questions, we have a couple of hands raised already, and I'd like to turn it over to public comment.
Okay, we'll start with Frank Klinisch. Apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Please go ahead. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, can you hear me? I think you might have addressed this already. I live across the street from the high school, and just in the previous comment. So there is a lot of, pick up and drop off, especially during, in the morning, in the afternoons, and on the weekends, a lot of events. So the idea, because I don't think we saw that in the drawings that were presented tonight, we just saw the intersections north and south, is to basically keep the loading zones in front of the high school, just shift them out to accommodate the bike lane. Is that correct?
So
if you'll go ahead with your comments, we'll get back to you at the end with responses.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess my comment is that I'm concerned about the impacts on traffic, especially during pickup and drop off, that there just would be a lot of congestion around the high school. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Next is a telephone number that ends in 694, please. Go ahead. You may need to use *6 to unmute yourself.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. This is Will Hale. I live on the 700 block of Key Route Boulevard, and I wrote one of the letters in. One thing I'd like to point out is the Zoom link doesn't seem to be working, so it makes this less of a publicly accessible meeting. And then the other thing is, please don't take away the parking. I think the limited survey in the middle of the day that the city did doesn't represent the actual parking impacts. And I mentioned in my letter that when I applied for an exemption to off-street parking requirement when remodeling my house, the city denied that. And initially I was thinking, well, there's plenty of parking, but it turns out the city was right. There's not a lot of parking. There are frequent events that fill the parking. I'm a block away from Memorial Park and the pool and the high school, and those parking spots fill up on my block. You know, swim meets, triathlons, events by the city like music in the park. There's all kinds of things, and anything with the school, graduations and performances at the auditorium, fills up the parking. So we really, the city has limited parking as it is. And it's a wide street, so you know I've been safely riding my bike on the street for a long time. A bicycle lane would be great, but not at the expense of parking spots. And then I think one of the commissioners mentioned the bus unloading, and I think that was misunderstood. If a bus pulls up and all the children on the bus have to cross the bike lane, that's going to cause problems. Anyone getting dropped off on the other side of the bike lane is going to have to cross that bike lane. And passengers who open their car doors who aren't drivers, who are used to checking their mirrors before opening a door, oftentimes these are children, will just walk into the bike lane. So it seems like it's going to cause more problems than it's worth. And not to mention for cyclists, they got to switch on one block from being on one side of the parked cars, and then on the next block to being on the other side of the parked cars, and then on the next block to back to the other side of the park. It's just going to be confusing. So that was my main point. And then I don't know if you're also taking comments on the stop signs in the medians, like at Washington and Portland and Thousand Oaks. I think that's a terrible idea. The current stop signs at Brighton and Key Route don't make any sense. For years I've wondered what those are there for, and they don't seem to improve safety at all. There's plenty of visibility and people make turns there all the time just fine. So I would hope you wouldn't interrupt the flow of traffic for that reason. There was a comment, I think, by maybe one of the people you hired that said it would improve safety, and I mentioned this in my letter, changing the speed limit to 10 miles an hour also improves safety, but that's silly. And I think these median stop signs are silly too. So I hope you guys do take public comment seriously and don't move forward with what you've already spent money on. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next, Ina Dallas, please go ahead. You'll need to unmute yourself, Ina.
Excuse me. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I am the assistant principal at Albany High School. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Like a caller previous to me speaking, I had a difficult time signing on to the Zoom link this evening. So please forgive me if my questions are a repeat or if I'm repeating information that's already been said. But I did want to raise my hand and make a public comment about the impact on the high school. There is a great concern about the loss of parking, not just in front of the high school itself, but also in the surrounding blocks. We do have, as I'm sure you all know, we do have about 100 or plus staff members that use that parking. We also have visitors, parents that come and use the high school for all of our wonderful events, such as performing arts events and sports events. And the loss of the parking could have a very negative impact on our community at the high school. Being that we are the only high school in Albany, I hope that you all are able to see that being able to access the high school and not have all of our parking that is needed spill over into our neighbors is an important issue. And I respect the intention of wanting to make the roadway safer for bicyclists. I do also want to point out that Ohlone Way's beautiful bicycle path is very close to Key Route. And let's see, I had a couple of other points to make. One of which, and then forgive me, I might have missed this because I had a hard time signing on, but I'm not sure of your timeline of moving this forward, but I do hope that there is more opportunities for our staff and our community to make public comment on the possible impacts. And then I would like to end with a question. And my question is, has it been calculated how many parking spots? I know you mentioned earlier in the call that there was over 364 spaces currently. Now, do we know how many parking spots could be lost if this plan moves forward? That's a question I have. I'm not sure if anyone has
Great.
the answer to it.
Yeah, and we will answer questions at the end of public comment.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for your input. And,
thank you. Thank you for your time.
And next speaker, Amy Smallins. Amy, please go ahead.
Hi there. I've been recovering from surgery and rehabbing coincidentally at my boyfriend's house on Key Route Boulevard for almost 2 months. So I've spent a lot of time observing traffic and walking with a walker and a cane very slowly on and around Key Route and crossing Key Route. The first thing I will say that people drive really, really, really fast on Key Route. It's one way. There's no visual friction. I learned that term in this meeting years ago to slow people down. It's really wide. That's what boulevards are. They're wide and people fly. And to be honest, the stop signs are sort of a suggestion. I see drivers go through stop signs constantly, some rolling, some flying. It's really less than safe for kids cycling, walking to school. A couple of weeks ago, a neighbor told me she was walking her dog, crossing Key Route at Washington. She witnessed a car run a stop sign at Key Route in Washington, and it hit another car. That could have been her with the dog, or it could have been a kid walking or biking to school, or it could have been you, or it could have been me. Anything that'll slow drivers down will enhance safely for people biking and walking. As you see, there's demand. Look at the full bike racks. There's demand for kids riding to school. I'll also point out that most homes on Key Route and in the area have driveways and garages, and sometimes they choose not to use them, but they can. I was walking back home at 6:30 and on the 800 block and east side of the 800 block, and 2/3 of the driveways were empty and there were cars parked in front. So it may be more convenient to park on Key Route, but if residents want to leave more parking for people shopping, which is great, and dining at local businesses, they should consider using their own driveways and maybe their own garages. And your shared mobility data that you showed earlier does demonstrate that car share is really a viable option as second car, and it's getting more popular. Our city's 1 square mile, and we don't have winter. I mean, there's honestly, there's little reason for an able-bodied student to be driving or being driven to school, or their parents for events or graduation. I saw plenty of parents walking to graduation. When I was a kid in New York, where there was winter, a lot of my teachers took the Long Island Railroad to the station and walked a few miles or took the bus to school. So people can do that here. In El Cerrito, Ashbury, which is the continuation of Key Route, has bike lanes, so let's join them. Please prioritize the health and safety of people including students cycling and walking in our city, over loading zones and car storage and occasional regional events. Remember, you guys are Albany's official active transportation advisory body, so please protect people, including kids traveling to high school, and help Albany meet its climate action goals, walking and biking. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We're about to close public comment. If any of the remaining attendees wish to comment on this item, now is the time. Please use the raise your hand button. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Thank you for those comments. Let's see, we had a question from the assistant principal about numbers of parking spaces that will be replaced under the plans. And I guess that's kind of a variable number depending on what's adopted or proposed.
Yeah, I can bring up this slide again. So this identifies in the dotted blue dashed area the potential parking spaces for different segments of Key Route northbound that we are under consideration. So for between Portland and the northern city limits, it would be approximately 39 spaces. The Portland to Washington block would be additional 28 spaces, and the Washington to Solano block would be 29 spaces. And the other question I think that I heard was verifying, since we had the plan view just showing the ends of the block to show the transitions, that yes, the design proposal would be for the full length of the blocks and carry that design through the block.
Great. Thank you. Commissioners, who would like to start the discussion off? Commissioner Del Rosario.
Just before we go into a technical discussion, can staff look into the issue with the Zoom link and if that's an actual thing? Because we did get a decent amount of written comments, and so I would expect a decent amount of attendees to the meeting, especially if it's online.
Right. Our colleagues behind the scenes are looking into that. There does appear to have been some sort of an issue. I don't know exactly what it is. So we should take that into consideration when you get to the end of the discussion.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Thanks for bringing that up. I'll just mention that one of our commenters brought up the issue of our previously specified stop sign installations, which are again brought into the mix here. So we should think about if we want to modify that plan, and then to what extent and where we're interested in changing the pattern of Key Route for bike facilities. Would anyone care to start the discussion? Commissioner Graham.
I have two thoughts that I just want to share before we talk about the actual design, which is that our work plan for the year talks about updating the active transportation plan. And in general, I have a problem with doing these one-off designs of bike and pedestrian improvements through the paving plans, outside of sort of that community focused design. You know, the active transportation plan is supposed to be our guide for what we want the bicycle and pedestrian planning to be. And I realize that it might not have caught up with what we want it to be right now. But, you know, right now, if you look at it, it's a class 3 bike lane in this area, right? And so this is the same, to me, the same problem we also had in Marin when we were doing, you know, a pavement And I get it because funds are limited and we are forced to take any opportunity that we can. But in general, I have, and to one of the commenters, you know, or I think it was actually Commissioner Del Rosario's question, you know, how much time have people had to respond to this? These are big things that I think do need to be addressed in a citywide effort. That's my first note. And then second, I mean, related is that I think often then we start talking about things that we don't have the money to pay for as part of these projects because they are pavement upgrades, and we have the potential to sort of lose that opportunity by just sort of like doing these one-off designs. So I'm just going to throw that out there in terms of sort of like a problem with, like, I think we should be spending our time on like trying to focus on an active transportation plan update so that we can sort of reconceive of these things on the city level, so that then when we get to these issues, we know what to do. And it's, you know, we've already sort of addressed this in a bigger public community-wide forum. So
your points are well taken. Sometimes it does feel a little shoehorned into the process. And I agree that it'd be nice to consider things like this on a wider basis. I have found in my experience that we get a much fuller local participation when we have these individual projects in neighborhoods because of the focus. And some of that can get lost in a larger project like the ATP. So there are pluses and minuses. Other comments from commissioners? As chair, I'm supposed to let everyone else go first, and I'm attempting to do that. I see a hand from Commissioner Jamadal.
Thanks. I do appreciate the parking concern. I mean, that's often the case. Having gone through, I don't know how many graduations and school plays and sporting events and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, there's, you know, parking demand. It still doesn't feel like it 100% fills up in most cases. And we can probably, as a community, become less reliant on driving than we have been. But, you know, just looking at, again, trying to optimize the numbers, you know, the number of parking spaces on the median side versus the residential side. You know, we could leave the parking on the median and take it away from the residential side, as we discussed, I think, previously. Doesn't make a lot of difference. You know, starting from the south end, it's 6 difference on the first block, 6 on the next one. At the north end, it's 9. So, you know, over the whole span, 21 parking spaces. And then, you know, people have to cross the street to get to their home when they, you know, arrive with groceries or whatever it is. So I don't know that on a daily basis, I think that's probably less optimal. During those peak periods, we get a few more parking spaces. Not entirely sure that that's worth doing it that way. So as designed is probably still better, leaving the parking adjacent to the homes rather than on the median. You know, just sharing something in terms of my perceptions of the street, it's always felt like, you know, this big grand boulevard, very kind of attractive, but that's a very car-centric view of things. It never looked appealing to people on bikes. There's plenty of space, you know, and I'm comfortable riding on it, but I look at the section in El Cerrito and you got the bike lanes and it's like, that's kind of cool. Why, you know, why don't we have that? As one of the commenters mentioned. So it doesn't seem like we'd be giving up that much. I know it's some, and if it's in front of your house, it means more than if it's in front of, 2 blocks away or whatever it might be. But I think providing those bike lanes is useful. And I've had people in my job say, oh, there's another bike boulevard 4 blocks away. Why are you, talking about putting bike facilities on this street? If I turned that around and said, hey, there's another paved street 2 blocks over, why should we pave this street? People look at me like I was nuts. So why shouldn't we have a more complete bike network? We have a very complete car network already. So those are just kind of the thoughts I've got, and I think it's well worth pursuing making that improvement. And I acknowledge that in this case, it's just adding paint onto the paving. This is not a lot of concrete. I don't think we can really afford to go that way. So I don't want to set expectations that we will. And even painting the bike lanes is going to add some cost. I'm certainly aware of that. But I think in the end, if we make it easier, more comfortable, safer for kids biking to the high school, that would be a good thing.
Great. Can I ask you a couple questions?
Yeah.
Just so we can get into specifics. Are you suggesting that we eliminate parking on one side of northbound Key Route for the length or for part of it? What you thinking?
As proposed in concept 2 is what I was looking at, right? So that is eliminating parking in the northbound direction on one side in order to get a protected or buffered bike lane, protected by the high school, buffered everywhere else. And the sense that you're going to go from essentially a buffered class 2 bike lane to a protected class 4 bike lane at the high school and then pop back out, not really much of a shift. It's, you're headed north in a regular bike lane, then you move curbside by the high school, and then you come back away from the curb at the end of the high school. That's fine. And I think that the buffer between the drop-off lane, if you want to think of it that way, and the bike lane in front of the high school is wide enough. Yes, we're going to have to work with the high school to remind the kids, when you get out of the car, watch for bikes. But right now, a lot of folks are getting dropped off on the median side and crossing travel lanes of cars. And personally, as much as it might sound scary to cross a bike lane with bikes, the number of people killed by cars is far more than the number of people killed by bikes. The risk is just not the same. We don't want people, getting into collisions, but the consequence of those collisions would be relatively minor compared to the ones that we just completely ignore of the kids walking across the street where this car is going.
Great. Thanks. Commissioner Del Rosario.
Thanks. And my comments are similar to Commissioner Jobno, so I'll try to be quick. But I do think if there is indeed a challenge with people signing on to this meeting to provide public comment, that we should give them the extended opportunity to provide public comment. And I don't know logistically how that works if we continue the item to the next commissioner meeting. Maybe we don't have to have the same in-depth discussion from the commissioners, but perhaps if we represent the information so that the public can chime in. Which probably means that we'd have to have further discussion as a commission anyways. But I do want to make sure that that's addressed. So yeah, I mean, everything that Commissioner Jobno said is correct. The one thing I want to add to that is that, we're really feeling a climate crisis right now. And one of the things that we can do as residents in a semi-urban environment is reduce our driving and reliance on private auto. That's probably the most significant thing we can actually do. Maybe stop eating meat, but I digress. And this project seems to dot all the I's and cross all the T's, and that it does make driving less preferable, both in terms of parking storage, and then having cars have the conflicts of dropping off at the school. And then it increases the ability for those to take a bike to either the schools or just along Key Route in general, continuing on to El Cerrito. You know, I bike oftentimes down Thousand Oaks with my kids and then head right on Key Route. And what I tell my kids to do is, you know, we make a turn after, you know, at that stop there. And, you know, cars will stop for us on the south leg of that intersection. And I tell them, let's pick up the pace. Let's start pedaling really fast so we can get past this one single block so that we can get into the bike lane and not have to worry about a car, you know, potentially conflicting with one of us as we're riding through. And so this would definitely relieve that stress by having a lane that's continuous all the way into the next city to the north. I am a little bit concerned about the conflicts of passenger drop-off at the school, and I think there are some more expensive things you can do for treatments, but there's probably just some things that we can do that are low cost just to make that more visible, and then have cyclists just be aware, like, okay, I'm in this zone, I'm supposed to be more cautious, and so perhaps there's treatments with paint and striping in the bike lane there that has the cyclist slow down a little bit and just be more cautious. And then I'm actually in favor of buffer bike lanes all the way out to Solano. I know that there was a comment in the staff report that that's not necessarily part of the bike network, but Solano itself is a destination, and so I think in order to get there and from there via a bike seems attractive to me. And then finally, I wholeheartedly agree with Commissioner Graham's comments. Unfortunately, we're here where we are, right? And there's not much that we can do at this point, but that is something that we need to prioritize is the active transportation plan, so that we have some guidance for making these decisions going forward, because we are doing something different from what the old plan is recommending.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Graham.
Yeah, after I did my diatribe on why we should all be good planners, I mean, I also agree with the comments, and especially with the goal, I mean, understanding, you know, the climate goals that we are not going to be able to achieve in my perspective. And I also, though, do want, I mean, there's a lot that's said about these events, these weekend events, and these, like, I don't, you know, big things, and like, but I think that we shouldn't, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater to say, like, you don't always plan for the biggest event in the world. I think we have in the past, but I think that that's why we sort of have so much asphalt in the world and to begin with, right? And I think, you know, there's also this comment about the spillover parking into the neighborhoods, but as far as I'm concerned, neighborhood parking is, you know, like any parking spot that is open is like up for grabs. Like I live in where I get a ton of spillover parking from Solano Avenue, and that's what it is, right? I'd rather see the parking that does exist be utilized than not, right? And so, you know, and if people have to park 3 or 4 blocks away, you know, then that is, like one of the commenters said, not the end of the world, right? Because it doesn't even rain here, you know, it's nice, and, you know, we have pretty good pedestrian facilities. So I think that some of those, you know, sometimes we get stuck on sort of planning for the ideal, and then we lose sight of sort of the everyday. So that's just my sort of philosophical comment. I'm done.
Thank you. Commissioner Fong.
Yeah. I think I can echo a lot of the other commissioners' comments. You know, I think definitely we are in a climate crisis and we need to be prioritizing non-car transportation. And I think this road in particular definitely, you know, can hear some of the need for, you know, people to get to the school. So I definitely am hearing that. You know, at the same time, I do think that, it is a very ideal time to be able to, create more opportunities for students to be able to get to school via bike, and to be able to do that safely, and even to start to create those habits for our kids. And as a road, I think it is very elegant, like as you mentioned, to be able to continue the bike lane into El Cerrito. And even this road already has 2 lanes of parking, and most streets, I think it has 4 lanes of parking, and most streets have 2. So it already has quite a bit. And I think one of the people who commented said, Albany is basically 1 square mile. Like really, it's a distance that people could be walking or biking, and it's an ideal distance for that, in fact. So I think that generally supportive of kind of a bike lane here. I know Commissioner Dolores mentioned a completely buffered bike lane. I would be open to that idea as well. Any way that we can make these bike lanes safer is a priority in my book. That's everything I have to say about it for now.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, after a bit, we do get some good comments there, and I think there's some consistency in what's being said. I too feel strongly that Key Route is an increasingly separated byway as you get to El Cerrito, and the truth is, all streets are places that cyclists desire to ride, and this is one that includes a high school that's not connected to the Greenway, and I think it's important to support biking there. So I definitely support the buffered bike lane in front of the school, and to the northern edge of the city. I might be willing to compromise south of Portland. Certainly on the westbound, coming from the Washington area, which is near my neighborhood, it's possible to cut over to Portland on Ramona or Pomona, and those can actually be better ways to get into that area. We're really looking to support our climate action and carbon reduction plan, a lot of which has to come from reductions in transportation. If we just support all of the parking spaces around the high school, then people will continue to drive there because it's convenient. That doesn't mean that nobody should drive. It just means that we need to change our habits, and we have to start somewhere. We've talked a little bit, and we heard some public comment about the speeds of vehicles on Key Route. And I'm wondering if, currently there are speed bumps in the southbound direction, and there's one, I think there's one in the intersection at Thousand Oaks. But there are not complementary speed humps in the northbound direction. Might be something we want to consider. The idea of three-dimensional support for these new designations of lanes is attractive to me. I will note, though, that there are at least 2 events that take advantage of the streets surrounding the Memorial Park Albany High block for cycling. One is the Albany Tri, and the other is the Albany Criterion. And it would be difficult to run those events if there were raised surface elements on Key Route between from the intersections of Portland to Thousand Oaks. So just throw that out, unfortunately. Even flexible bollards could be dangerous. Having said that, though, on Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C., there are removable streetlight stanchions in the middle of the street to support the mid-street 2-way bicycle path that are removed for parades. So nothing is impossible. Obviously, the budget in DC might be different than the budget here. I agree that I'm not ready to make a final decision this evening. I think you know, the rushed comments by the high school and the inability of some people to connect easily means we should come to some kind of near consensus if we can tonight, and then continue this item and revisit it so that we can capture as much of the public comment as we can. And I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. There were actually sort of two things going on here. One was, you know, do we want to continue with our recommendation for the stop signs? I didn't hear any commissioners speak against the mid-intersection stop signs. So can we assume that we agree that that should move forward? Can I head nodding, head shaking? Not sure. Okay. And then the other item is, to what extent and in which locations, what form do we want to support bikes on Key Route? And what I was mostly hearing was having repurposing parking on Key Route northbound from Solano through to the northern boundary, and having a protected bike lane in the Portland to Thousand Oaks block, and then southbound having a buffered bike lane without removal of parking from the northern boundary of Albany to Solano Avenue. Is there anybody who wants to deviate from that? Okay. So, Mr. Freed, perhaps we can put this on a future agenda as soon as possible with that recommendation as our starting point.
Yeah, just an update. I believe there was a typo in the agenda Zoom link, so that was the difficulty some folks were having. I think Jeff was noting that a few people may have joined. If you wanted to see if there's additional feedback now, we could, put this on a future agenda item with a recommendation as a consent item that would be pulled if additional folks want to speak to it, or as you see fit, if you want to continue this item to be a discussion.
I'm happy to do both. Commissioner Javadal, do you want to comment before or after public comment?
Just a quick comment about I'll do it now. I'd still love to hear the public comment from any of the new folks. Just a design nuance, Andrew, for the paint buffered bike lanes. I generally like when we can have a door zone buffer incorporated in that. So I'm fine with a narrower traffic side buffer and a bigger door zone buffer if we can pull it off. And it may mean that the effective painted bike lane is really skinny, but with good buffers on either side, that's okay. So just putting that out there, if there's another revise to the plans at some point, that might be something good to incorporate. Thank you.
Have you seen the sidecar bicycle trailer? Still, they could adapt. Great.
Well, they can use the buffer. There's nothing to keep you from riding in the buffer. It's kind of a suggestion. But, having not really understood the door zone when I was a kid, and it wasn't until high school where I heard about, one of my friends, saying, oh, his brother got doored. I'm like, what's that? I think we kind of need to get this built into our infrastructure so everybody knows, both the people biking and the drivers. Why is that bike not riding next to the parked cars? Well, there's a very good safety reason for it. And when we build that into the infrastructure design, I think it just helps elevate the public understanding.
Great. I concur, and it reminds me that one of our public commenters brought up essentially right side dooring, but there is a buffer built in to that protected bike lane that takes care of that potential issue as well. Commissioner Fong?
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to agree with Commissioner Chavandal's suggestion.
Great. Let's see if there's any additional public comment from people who haven't yet had a chance to comment. So if you haven't had a chance to comment on this item and you've arrived later, or you have even, as long as you haven't commented before, you're welcome to comment now, and you would use the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. I see at least one.
Okay, Steve Devine, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. And I just wanted to say I support what I think is the staff recommendation, but I guess I have to say that with the package and then the discussion, I'm not exactly sure what exactly it seems like folks are endorsing. So if you are indeed having another meeting, if it could be sort of boiled down to a layperson's simple description as to what the recommendation is, that'd be great for the neighbors so we can understand what's on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Great. So, any questions from staff as to the intent?
So we'll bring this back for your next meeting, and yeah, we do expect it to be we'll make sure the Zoom link works. We do expect the next meeting to be full for a variety of other agenda items as well. So we'll try to consolidate this into a rather concise action for the commission, and giving members of the public who were unable to attend their full opportunity to address the commission.
So we'll try and agendize that for the January meeting, which will be the 4th Thursday in January. Great. Thank you very much to all the commenters. We do listen and read all of your comments and take them into account. And we appreciate the input. And with that, I'm going to close this item. Move on to our announcements, item number 6.
Thank you, Chair McCroskey. We had one listed item, which was that as we mentioned at the last meeting, the City Council has now discussed the outdoor dining program and provided comments to staff. And the direction was to proceed with developing a long-term program proposal and bringing it to the Transportation Commission and the Economic Development Committee. So we'll continue to work on that and bring it to you when we have a draft proposal.
Great. I'd like to announce that my elected chairmanship of this commission is up this month. We're encouraged by the City Council and our rules of committees and commissions to rotate the chair. I'm happy to serve and enjoy it, but I think everybody should have a chance. Vice Chair Fong has politely declined to apply for the chair or to put his name forward for next year due to personal and professional reasons, and I respect that. But I encourage him to consider in the future. We won't address this issue this evening, but we will in January. Sorry, Commissioner Graham, as one of the newer members who has not yet served as chair, we will be encouraging you to consider the position as well. It's fair warning.
Am I allowed to respond?
We're pushing the bounds, and
Okay.
you're not required. You're not to take on this position, and I'm forewarning you that we will be discussing it in January.
Excellent.
Thank you. And by the way, if anybody has any questions about the role or the demands or anything, I'm happy to talk outside of the commission meetings about whatever. Any other announcements from the commission? Commissioner Del Rosario.
NTC put a press release out, I think yesterday, and East Bay Times picked it up that the park and ride at Buchanan will be opening, and it'll have free parking for the first month, and I think it's $3 a day afterward. At AC Transit, the buses tested the bus stop and that queue jump signal that's there. So the transit service is all ready to go. What's also good is that prior to the pandemic, this bus was very full. Now it's about half full, and so there is capacity. And so if you do decide to take advantage of this park and ride lot and take the bus, you'll be able to get a seat. So that's promising, but good news to see this finally launched.
That's terrific. And as I understand it, this is a manned or staffed parking lot during certain hours.
That's my understanding too. Yes.
So it sounds like you don't have the details.
No,
I know there is.
That's not what I read.
I know there's bike parking there, and if the gates are only open when it's staffed, I guess it's not as important. But somebody was wondering if there were bike link lockers there. So I'll be checking that out.
Yep.
Great. Other announcements from the commission? Well, then we'll move on to the next item, future agenda items. Are there requests from the commission for future agenda items in addition to what we've already discussed this evening? Which include continuing our discussion item and when are we going to work on the ATP? I got that. Okay. Well, with that, it's my honor as your chair to wish you all fabulous continuing holidays, which have already started, and a joyous and a peaceful and healthy new year. And we look forward to reconvening with this group on January 27th at 7 p.m., the fourth Thursday of January. Thank you all for your year of service, and see you soon.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you.
And thank you to staff.
Thanks all.